everybody. Captain Bill Guston, your humble, old, loyal captain from Miami-Dade Fire Rescue Department, Southeast Florida. Welcome to this month's Humpday Hangout. We're going to discuss some of the classes that we attended at FDIC. If you'll remember, in our previous meeting last month, we talked about the classes that we intended on attending. And this month, we're going to talk about what we took away from some of those classes. But without any hesitation, because we have a very special guest visiting with us, a heck of a gentleman, a heck of a guy, an icon in the fire service, firefighter Kevin Shay. You are a firefighter or lieutenant? I want to let you do a quick introduction. Kevin, I know that you are a very humble guy. So, Daryl, if you could add some details to his illustrious career, because I know that you're too polite and you're too humble to mention some of the things that you've achieved on the FDNY. Just have a few words. Can you give us a few words?
Sure. It's okay.
Yeah, you could hear.
Yeah, your topic today was, this is my first time here, so thank you all for having me. And your topic today was the classes that you attended at FDIC. I'm lucky enough to be on the staff for Bobby with the classrooms, but I'm unable to stay any particular time at one class. I have to bounce around a bit. I stay in my hallway down to 130 classrooms. I had a great time this year, like always. It's kind of like I get the sampler platter. I jump into each class without trying to interrupt instructors. But some of my favorites are, Bobby, do you remember who gave the class on winches and rigging for vehicles?
Oh, that was our new guy, Isaac Frazier, or he did one, and also, it'll come to me in a second, he's a great guy out of Jersey. I want to say Donahue.
Okay, the class was excellent, Bobby. A lot of times when you're doing the vehicle extrication, and now what I'm training for privately for spec or for the Genesis tool, everybody wants to cut up cars. A lot of fun. I hope I'm not getting off track with your topic today. But as things move in, sometimes how many ways can you cut the door? Can you cut the roof or the A post, B post? You know, and it's good to change it up. But a lot of it now, the more advanced stuff, has to do with more vehicle stabilization. Whether I'm marrying two vehicles together, one's on top of another, or it's rocking on a Jersey battery, barrier, or what have you. A lot of stabilization, and I really enjoyed that fella gave the winch class. It had to do with a lot of rigging. He gave information on how the chains are rated, the hooks are rated, and sometimes when we get off on a topic, you know, we are the masters, you know, jack of all trades, masters of none. That's the fire service. I run around, I grab a little bit of cutting torch. I'm not a professional welder, you know what I mean? I grab a little bit of rigging. I'm not a professional rigger. So I enjoy now, at this point, when you try and master the basics as best you can, when the guys get into more advanced situations, I try and back up and say, what's the professional doing? What's the tow truck guy doing with his hooks? And there's always something to learn, you know. And I find that that's something with the vehicles. Guys are more focused now on their different stabilization techniques, and yet they're skipping some of the basics for what the people in that trade would consider basics. How you rate the chains, how you rate the hooks, you know, the different tags that were on there. I got a lot of information from that guy's class. I enjoyed it. And here I am teaching vehicle stabilization, extrication. I was embarrassed that I didn't know some of the information on the chains. You know, I just say, oh, what's it rated for? Good to go. I didn't get that in depth on those topics. So I took a lot out of that class. You know, I enjoyed that.
If I could interject for 1 second here, just so folks know who they're listening to, this is Kevin Shay, who's got, as Bill said, an illustrious career in the FDNY, and he's a very humble guy. You may remember it was 25 years ago this year that there was a tremendous rope rescue of a civilian who had was attempting to commit suicide, was out on a ledge, and at the time, as Kevin was just saying, our techniques and our equipment was not as elegant and refined as it is today. But Kevin was the firefighter who was lowered by his fellow firefighters, including Patty Brown and Ray McCormick, on a rope, a single-line rope, to where Kevin effected the rescue of this civilian off the side of this high-rise building. It's an iconic rescue. There are photos of it. If you Google Kevin Shay and rope rescue, it'll come up. It was an incredibly courageous and heroic thing to do, and the best traditions of the fire service, probably unparalleled since then in terms of selflessness and risk. He was not anchored to any rated anchor. He was being held by his fellow firefighters. So it clearly was almost an Iwo Jima type moment, if you will, for the fire service, where Kevin was the individual who stepped forward and was willing to take on that risk. Fast forward a few years, the first World Trade Center bombing, which a lot of people forget about, which killed many New Yorkers and people, had tremendous damage to the World Trade Center, created a huge crater in the floor. Kevin was among the first responding units to that particular explosion. It was a car bomb in the parking garage trying to take down the buildings via a car bomb. And Kevin, as they were going through their exploratory sequencing, Kevin fell into that crater and was impaled on some rebar where he was tremendously injured, sustained significant injuries, but nonetheless persevered and survived and went on to finish his career with the FDNY. Since that time, Kevin has been integral at FDIC. He helps manage all the classroom activities. He's an incredible liaison to FDIC. He recruits instructors for us constantly. He's the consummate professional, and he also produces a television show for our Fire Life magazine, where he goes hunting with firefighters all over the world. Kevin's gone hunting all over the world, but in particular, he goes on hunts with folks. If you're a firefighter in Oklahoma or you're a firefighter here and there, he's got shows from everywhere where he's gone hunting with firefighters. He's an avid hunter, outdoorsman, environmentalist, and true icon of the fire service. So I know he wouldn't brag about himself, so I hope you guys don't mind that I took a moment to say that it is truly an honor to be among the folks who can call Kevin a friend, and it's truly an honor to say that I know him. And when people talk about real leadership, Kevin Shay is real leadership.
Absolutely. Thanks for saying some more words about him. I just met Kevin here about 10 minutes ago and asked him to pop in on this. So thanks again for doing that. But in just a brief amount of time meeting him, you can tell he is still a student of the job and extremely humble. He worked in busy engines, trucks, Rescue 1 in Manhattan, and in just a few minutes he's telling you the things that he doesn't know. He's not resting on his laurels of his time in these busy companies. He's still a student of the job, even in retirement, and trying to learn more, if it's things on auto extrication.
A lifestyle. It's not a job, you know. It's who becomes your identity, who you are. As a matter of fact, the hunting and fishing, I didn't take it up till I retired. I fished as a kid. I never hunted, and that feeling around the firehouse kitchen is so strong. A lot of retired guys miss it so terribly that that's the feeling of camaraderie I get at the hunting camp, and that's why it's not about a big, trophy animal or whatever. It's about just being with the guys in those situations, work as hard as you can during the day, then hang out at night, and that friendship and camaraderie. And I miss it so much that I just won't live without it. So I make it wherever I go. And I want to thank you, Bobby, again, not only for having me today to say hello, and you too, Bill, and everybody, Mike, but thanks for keeping me around FDIC, Bobby. I don't know what I'd do without the fire service. I'd be a lost man, So thank you, guys. I'm sorry I got to go back to that conference, but I appreciate you very much letting me duck in. Thank you, guys. Take care.
All right.
Love you, Kevin.
Thank you.
Good seeing you.
Right.
Be well, Kevin.
Thank you, brother.
Everybody who has been touched by Kevin Shay is a better firefighter and a better fire officer because of it. I want to thank our sponsors. Key Hose. Kevin was mentioning rescue tools. The most effective rescue tool in the hands of firefighters is not a hydraulic device. It's not a rope rescue pulley mechanical advantage system. It's not a ladder. It is a hose line. First and foremost, that's what saves most lives. I can't think of any piece of equipment on the fire ground in the hands of firefighters that is more important than their fire hose. It is truly their lifeline. Don't go cheap on hose. try to save the money somewhere else. You need a hose that is highly reliable, durable, has a good balance of kink resistance, weight, and abrasion resistance. You cannot go wrong with Key. My company uses it. I swear by it. So as I say every month, it's an easy endorsement. I think what we'll do now is we'll go ahead with the introductions, and then I've got some housekeeping about applying for next year's FDIC and some archived webcasts. But myself, I've been a firefighter for 42 years, began in the Chicago area in Wheaton, Illinois, and worked in Naperville, Illinois as well, and for the last 38 years with the Miami-Dade Fire Department in Miami, Florida. And, you know, we talk about the brotherhood and camaraderie. I feel that when I'm with you guys every month right here. And I walk away from this feeling like I'm a better firefighter, and it lifts my spirits. Because if you want to, if you're working in the big city, particularly if you are delivering EMS at a alarmingly increasing rate, it can get you down. It can get you down. And I'm not bashing EMS, but it can get you down. It's things like these Google Hangouts. It's things like FDIC. It's things like networking with your brother and sister firefighters that lifts your spirit and keeps your heart in this job. So having said that, Mr. Mike, Captain Mike, the second oldest guy here, quick introduction.
Yeah, hi folks, Mike Dugan here again. I want to thank Key Hose again. I want to thank Bobby Holton and Bill and all the other guys who come on. It's an honor to be here and be part of this team. And it's also an honor to be part of FDIC and be talking about what I learned at FDIC. I look forward to a great discussion.
Okay, thanks, Captain Mike. Daryl Liggins?
Well, certainly have a tough gentleman to follow there that was sitting next to me. But I'm Daryl Liggins. I'm a captain with the Oakland, California Fire Department. I work on an engine company. This is my 23rd year in the fire service. Still learning.
All right. My surrogate son from Las Vegas would be Clark Lamping. Little introduction, sir.
Morning, everybody on the West Coast. Good afternoon, everybody on the East Coast. Clark Lamping here from the Clark County Fire Department, Southern Nevada, Las Vegas area. I've been on the job 18 years. Sounds like I am by far the most junior person on the panel. I work out of Station 11 on Las Vegas Boulevard, engine and truck 11. We cross-man our equipment, so I'm a captain on engine and a truck. And I got to tell you, that was awesome having Kevin Shay on the Hangout. I've been reading about him and listening to his lectures, and himself and Captain Pat Brown and several of those other guys. That was absolutely awesome to have him on this program. That made my whole day right there. I'm done for the day. I'm going to bed.
Yeah, and you know, when Kevin was talking, I'll tell you what he was talking about because we're at another conference, about the rope rescue and some historical events that he was part of. Some of the gear that they used to wear, and he really says, wear your gear. Know your gear, wear your helmet, your coat, your turnout pants, understand its limitations, and make sure that you check this stuff and you're wearing it right. You know, they used to wear the cheater masks and other things that they've moved on from, and he said that stuff really saved his life, especially when he fell into that pit in the first World Trade Center bombing. You know, we're not all going to be in something that dramatic, but our gear day to day can really help keep us protected.
Boss, words of wisdom for us?
I'm Bobby Halden, and I work for Fire Engineering and FDIC, Penwell Fire Group. I'm Assistant Chief of Training for the Limestone Fire Protection District, Volunteer Fire Department in Owasso, Oklahoma. I've got the great pleasure of being allowed to hang around with people like Mike Dugan and Bill Guston and Clark Lamping and Dan Shaw and all these other, and Kevin Shay, and continually learn from them. So it's a fascinating and humbling experience being a firefighter. And Kevin said it so well. You know, we learn something every day, and the only thing I think that gets in the way of our learning sometimes is our own arrogance and Kevin is a wonderful example of how to be open and gentle and loving and kind and compassionate. And when you do all those things, you really show how strong you are. Real tough guys are the most gentle people you'll ever meet. And Kevin's probably the most gentle person I've ever met.
And for those of us who are listening, those people who don't know about the first World Trade Center bombing, if you Google it, it was February 26, 1993. The first World Trade Center bombing, we lost 6 civilians. A couple of firemen were very severely injured, including Kevin. Google it and see what happened. It is the first real attack on New York City.
All right, folks. Second only to being there in person in FDIC. I think the boss is getting called. Is to attend the archived webcast sessions. And I want to give you a schedule of the webcast. And what these were is classes at FDIC that were filmed live at the time, and then are archived and will be webcasts. And now, starting off on May the 17th, and these webcasts are 3 o'clock Eastern, 2 o'clock Central. And if this guy's becoming quite a distraction here. Who is it? May 17th, construction concerns. Greg Havel. If you don't know what the term cross-laminated timber is, you better as a firefighter and fire officer, because it is coming to a construction site near you. The construction industry is being pressured by environmental groups for sustainable construction. What that applies to, what that really means is very, very large and very tall buildings that are built almost entirely of wood, sections, panels that can be used as floors, as walls. What an eye-opener. There's plans already, I believe it is in Canada, to build a 60-story wood high-rise. In the UK, they also have plans. And then the cavities are filled with cellulose insulation. And I think we all know what the fire performance of that stuff is.
Bill, there's also plans to build one in New York City, Bill.
Okay, if you don't know what cross-laminated timber is, you get your head in the sand. And this is why we have got to be lifelong students of the fire service, even old buzzards like me, because it's going to be coming to my community. Construction concerns, Greg Havel, a wonderful background in construction, a true gentleman. It will be May 17th at 3 Eastern and 2 Central. On June the 14th, we've got Chief John Sulka, Chief Rick Lasky, and some guy, Halston. Halston? I think that was his name. Halston, yeah, he was being interviewed on New Year's Eve as Chief Halston. Oh, Halton, I'm sorry, Halton. It's going to be issues and challenges in the fire service. I understand you're going to go through everything from PPE to VES or VEIS, always a stimulating, very interesting, and discussion. Now, the best one, if you can only attend one, it's got to be June the 28th. That's Standpipe operations by a guy who's not only brilliant, but is humble and extremely good-looking. Bill Gustin, yes. That has never turned down anything that he could plagiarize or borrow anybody's ideas. Okay, then on July the 14th, I believe it is, the 14th or the 19th, Reading Smoke, Dave Dotson. If you've never seen his class, you got to see it. And he's constantly revising it. On August the 9th, SCBA Boot Camp. It will be presented by Captain Trevor Steedman of the Ocean City, Maryland Fire Department. All good presentations. Not all of us are fortunate enough to be able to attend FDIC. And even if you did, you can't go to every class. So this is how you make up for what you missed at FDIC.
Bill, where can people find that list? And instead of writing it down, where can they find that list? Is there going to be a link on this?
Yes, we will be posting it. We'll be putting it on the homepage of Fire Engineering and Firefighter Nation, so that for future reference, they'll be available. The schedule will be up there. Shannon is working with Pete Proclio and Bill Carey to get that completed, hopefully by the end of business today or tomorrow.
Okay, another housekeeping item is your applications to be an instructor, either hot workshop or classroom at FDIC 2017. Go to FDIC.com, click the call for presentations. The deadline would be June the 17th, so it's creeping up on us here real fast. And if you make a submittal and you're turned down, for God's sake, I was turned down a number of times. And don't get discouraged. Submit, change it a little bit, tweak it a little bit, submit it again next year. So, all right, now that we're done with some business, I want to pose the question. Last month we talked about the classes that we intended to attend. Now I want to pose the question, what did we take away from some of these classes? And I'll begin with Captain Mike.
Well, I went to a class that you also attended with Robin Zavotek from UL, John Cirillo, and Mike Galliano, which was a phenomenal class, and talking about the victim. And, you know, we hear all this stuff about profiling, victim profiling, and fire, and hit it hard from the yard and everything else. They very, very, very well. They put a class together talking about, you still have to go in there and do the search. You still have to, because there are possibilities, and there are things that can change the dynamic of the victim. So we're going to always be firemen. We have to go in there. And they put together an excellent, excellent class. And I thought that was great. I loved that class. And just because you brought up the webcast material, somebody told me, and I thought it was a brilliant, brilliant thing. It was a student I knew who was there and taking classes. And he said, you know what I did, Mike, this year? I said, no. And he said, I went and found out what was available on a webcast before I went through what I was going to take. And he said, if I know I want to go to the Standpipe operations for Bill Gustin, but it's available online, even though I want to go there, my second choice that's not available online, I'll go take that and then watch the class. And I'm like, okay, that's pretty brilliant. I thought that was really a very sharp move by a student of the game who was telling me that he was seeing what was available. And he told me he didn't come to my class because they had a webcast of it a couple of weeks before FDIC. And he said, I would have loved to, but I knew I could look at it, reference it there, and now I'm going to go to get something that I can't. And I thought that, as far as a student, I thought it was one of the smartest things I've heard.
Now, Daryl Liggins, you were not fortunate enough to make it this year, but prior to us coming on the air, we were discussing a couple of lesson learned fires that you've responded on within the last month or so. And I mean, that's our primary purpose here, is to talk about lessons learned at fires. So Daryl, if you'd share some ideas and some thoughts and experiences with us.
Yeah, I was unfortunately not able to attend to FDIC, but luckily at work I got some lessons learned. I think we had like 3 good fires that week. It's just really showcasing that the second due engine has to assist that first due engine if we want things to go smooth. Nothing bad happened as a result of the lack of the second due helping the first as much as I would like to see, but it's definitely some lessons that I'm sharing around my job. The first one was a house, about half of the house was involved, 2-story, started in the decks in the back of the house, and the first line ended up, although normally we're just going in with an 1 3/4 line, this thing was vacant, boarded up, weeds growing up 5 feet around the house, and the first line was a 2.5 stretched to the rear. And the first company encountered some problems with their water supply, but the second company stretched an 1 3/4 line for themselves to go on the front door. What that ended up happening, what it did is just slowed down getting water to the first line. They had a difficult stretch to get to the back of the house, through the weeds, through the bicycles and parked cars, and locked gates and everything else. And we can't all be concerned about getting our own nozzle. What was the next one? We had a 2-story vacant commercial building with a good amount of fire on the first and second floor, and the first line went into the first floor. It's venting out of about 5 windows. They obviously are going to need some help because they're going to be on this nozzle for a while. The second company stretched another line. It sounds good to stretch another backup line, but they needed help pushing down that hallway and getting people moving that line. So we got the job done, but at the end of the day, sometimes they need help. The other one, there was recently a bail that broke off of the nozzle of the first due engine company. I've never seen that before, but the first line they stretch to operate, when the nozzle firefighter operates the bail, it comes off completely in his hand. So it was difficult even just to notify the pump operator that they are going to be operating that bail, basically. But we got to help the first due engine. We can't be racing to the fire. There's many lessons learned that we can read about, but those are some of my takeaways since I wasn't at FDIC.
Yeah, excellent. And for your chief officers, one of your first sized-up considerations when you get on the scene is the first hose line in position and operating. And if it isn't, why isn't it? What is keeping this the most basic thing that we can do to protect the property and lives of the occupants is stretch and operate that first hose line. If that's not getting done, that's priority 1. Why is it not being taken care of? Daryl, if I can ask you this. The vacant with the fire that started in the back, was that built on a hill where you'd have like 2 stories in the front and 3 in the back?
No, and those of you that know the topography of Oakland, we have quite a bit of that. Probably half the city is like that, but in this case it wasn't. It was a flat lot.
All right. Well, let me play the devil's advocate here now. Why didn't you attack from the uninvolved side? Take the line in through the front.
It appeared that most of the fire was on the outside of the building. I wasn't on the first due company. I was on the third due company, so we ended up helping that first due company. And they had quite a bit of, it took quite a bit just to get into that front door. It was so heavily fortified. So the quickest water was, and I think you'd agree if you were there, was to just start getting water on the fire. We had 2 decks involved with all the surrounding debris piled up. As somebody, it was in the end occupied by hoarders. But But that first line pretty much put most of the fire out. We just cleaned it up a little bit with an 1 3/4 water.
You are preaching to the choir. You are preaching to the choir, and it's not just my experience or the experience of this panel here. It's also now been quantified by research by UL in their attic fire studies. When you got exterior fire spread on the exterior of a building, that first line has got to get around to the rear. If you pull up on a row of apartment buildings that's say 400, 500 feet wide, you got to get around to the Charlie, your side 3 side, and make sure it's not scaling the outside of the building on combustible balconies. Is the fire burning on one of these big wooden decks that's so common in suburban areas? The line, it sounds good to bring the line into the front door to protect the house, and I'm not in any way minimizing that importance, but you've got to get that first line around the back. If that's where the fire is, direct it up into the sockets, let that water cascade down the rear of the building, and get some water on the fuel that is creating the problem in the first place. Mr. Lamping, sir, some classes that you attended at FDIC, what you took away?
Yes, sir. If anyone's been watching these Hangouts, they would know that I was in the training division for the past year. I just came out of the training division last month. And the reason I'm bringing this up is I use quite a few of these recordings from FDIC 2015. And I use them on the training website. I incorporated them on our monthly training page, and I've got huge results out there. We have so many guys on my job, new guys, can't afford to get to FDIC. It's pretty expensive coming from the West Coast. And these, I've got really, really good reception from all these guys watching these training videos on our training website. So, you know, any training officers out there, this is a fantastic resource. It's free, and it motivates some people to actually get to FDIC in the next year. So I can't say enough about those webcasts. As far as the classes I took one from Dennis Laguerre. Dennis Laguerre taught Why Not the Why. And I thought this was interesting because I've known Dennis for several years. Dennis is a hydraulic genius is the only way to describe Dennis Laguerre. All he does is think about water movement. He doesn't have another normal thought in his mind. He can't even go to the grocery store without thinking about delivering water. So this guy is a genius. And a couple of years ago, he was really advocating the use of whys. And I thought it was interesting, so why not the why? I attended his class, and I've got to give Dennis huge props. Dennis stood in front of that class and said, I was wrong. I had the wrong information. I was teaching it wrong for years. We've got some new technology here. We've done some more research, and it turns out using the why is not the best option. Many times, in fact, he said most of the times, most of the departments that he visits use the why incorrectly. They don't have enough pressure on it, and he encourages these people, put some flow meters on the end of your lines when you're using whys to see how much water you are not flowing. And he had all kinds of research. He had some numbers down there. He had video, and it's pretty telling on what. And in my own agency, we use a lot of whys. We use whys for several applications. And as soon as I get my hands on a couple flow meters, our friend Paulie Shapiro, he was at FDIC. He has a bunch of flow meters. He's going to go out with us, and we're going to put on our why, and I'm going to test how much water is coming out of our whys in Clark County. And I'm pretty scared to see the results, to tell you the truth. But I can't say enough about Dennis Laguerre. I thought he was fantastic to stand up there and admit that he had made a mistake. And he was here at FDIC correcting his mistake.
I want to remind everybody that we are being sponsored by Key Hose. That's keyfire.com. And again, an easy endorsement for me because that's what my company uses. I don't know that we'll get to it today, and I'm not in any big hurry to get there. But one of the questions, one of the issues that I wanted to get to after we covered FDIC was, what is your fire department's procedure for extending a hose line connected to a standpipe outlet in the events that I'm sorry, let me rephrase this. I read the wrong question. How does your department connect a second hose line to a standpipe outlet? For example, do you connect a second line to a Y supplying the first line, or drop down to an outlet 2 floors below the fire floor? How do you avoid stealing pressure from the first line when flowing the second line? Now, I don't know that we'll get to that, and that's not important. We can always get. There's always going to be another month. There's always going to be another month.
Well, it's interesting that you say that now. Those of you that don't know, Dennis retired from Oakland. We worked on the same engine company for quite a few years in the same house, and we were having a lot of talks of hydraulics. And while we were working together is when our department changed its standpipe equipment, and I was one that felt strongly that we shouldn't have a gated Y, and a lot of those conversations started right there at our kitchen table of some of the problems you can encounter where it seems like you may be eliminating options, you may be really causing a situation that's going to be more beneficial to ensuring that you get water on the fire. So we eliminated the gated Y as part of that operation. Dennis was on board. He had come from a more rural department, and and such that used gated Ys for a lot of types of fire attack. And so anyway, very open-minded guy. I'm glad he taught that class, but I think that was really born of our change in our standpipe operations, where the second line will come off of another outlet, and we encountered problems with the gated Y, as well as recognize a lot of potential issues that can come from that.
Yeah, if I could mention what I learned at FDIC, I have to echo my brother, Captain Mike. What about the victim? Taught by Robin Zebotek, and a pleasant surprise, they weren't on the program, was Mike Galliano from Seattle, John Cirillo from FDNY. What a great mix, what a great chemistry. And what this had to do with is, I think all of us know in our experience that you can have a well-involved structure, let's say a single-family home, well-involved, and still have viable victims behind just a common panel or hollow core door. So the whole focus was, don't necessarily write these people off. And if I could mention this, I attended this class, and then I was not at this fire, but my companies in the central part of the county responded to a triplex in the early morning hours about 2 weeks ago. It'll be Saturday. It was one of these fires where you couldn't even find the front door. There was so much smoke laying down from the wind and the humidity. The engineers were taking a beating in the front yard. Burglar bars, typical Miami, on everything, They took a line to the engine 3, took a line to the front door and couldn't make it. There was just too much fire, too much heat. The second company took a line, and the two lieutenants, face to face, without a chief being there, said, "Hey, go to the fire, most direct way." Engine 40 went to the rear, operated a line through the burglar bars, and took enough energy away from that fire to allow engine 3 to come in through the front door for an interior attack and an interior search, and for Rescue 40 to take their saw, cut the bars. The first window they came to, when they made their sweep for VES, there she was. There was the victim. And to look at this building and to look at the aftermath of the pictures, you think there's no way that you could survive this. So the point of the class was well taken. Don't necessarily write off people. You can have a house that is 99% destroyed and there's still somebody that's viable in there, and that was a great class. Again, the other class that I learned was from the construction concerns, and again, this engineered lumber, this laminated veneer lumber, cross-laminated timbers. If you don't know about this stuff, you've had your head in the sand. Another one that I found very interesting was tilt-up construction from James Johnson, a young man from British Columbia. And I actually thought, well, he's going to bash the industry, the tilt-up industry. And he did not. He did not in any way. In a tilt-up constructed building, I know, Clark, you were there. You were there in the class. If it is built properly to proper codes, it is a rock-solid building, and as far as its tendency to collapse, is not that much different than concrete block, provided that it is built correctly. I want to mention again about our sponsor, Key Hose. Again, a hearty endorsement. If you've never had Key Hose in your hands, contact keyfire.com. Get a few samples of it, and try to kink it. Try to kink it, and it's almost impossible to kink. And kink resistance is a huge issue when we're talking low-pressure nozzles, because you don't have as much pressure to deal with. And one of the reluctance of some fire departments to use the so-called low-pressure or 50 psi nozzles is, well, our pump discharge pressure won't be high enough to take out the kinks. Well, that's not necessarily the case, provided you have inherently kink-resistant hose, and you can't get any better kink-resistant than Key. Having said that, let's go back to the topic of the why. I think that's a good place to start. It wasn't the first one, but Daryl, go ahead and expand on your experience. Let's talk about the line.
Well, I think one thing is high-rise buildings can be a little bit of a different animal than just off of the pumper. So, like I said, we started with really putting it out to our department that we were eliminating it for standpipe operations, but we didn't really use it for everyday operations either. My first 7 years in the fire service was in a suburban department where we had an evolution called the tank option 2. I think we all have different types of evolutions and names for it. These type of evolutions are largely from pre-connect heavy departments that have to look at going beyond the pre-connect for a lengthy stretch. And that was a 2.5 with a gated Y and a couple 1 3/4 bundles. And I think a real simple thing you can do is add a inline pressure gauge right behind each nozzle and have the pump operator supply one line properly, add a second line and open that one without any change at the pump panel. We know we'd make a change at the pump panel eventually, but these lines are operating not sustained most of the time. They're individually on and off, intermittent, I guess you could say. And you'll find the pump pressures are all over the place. So when that second line opens, both lines with our 7/8 tip, and we had 200 feet at 2.5 out for a test, they both go down to about 20 pounds, unusable. So now you have the pump operator bring up the pressure. So we're at 50 at the tip on each line, and then shut one line down. And you're going to have a nozzle pressure that's going to knock you down on your bottom. And it becomes more exaggerated the longer the length of 2.5, or the higher pressure the nozzle, or the greater the flow of each 1 3/4 nozzle. But when we get to standpipe evolutions also, a lot of times we need the hose from the second due engine. I know you were talking about a question maybe on extending lines. It may be needed just to replace a burst length or extend a line. You have a clogging issue, and I also don't want a device that can turn on and off before the nozzle. I want to be able to shut it on and off at the nozzle. I know plenty of departments are doing these type of evolutions successfully, but having the ability for your line to shut down prior to the nozzle can be a dangerous thing. And departments take extreme lengths, sometimes cutting handles down, bungeeing them up so they won't shut on or off. We shouldn't have to do this for our everyday operations.
Keep in mind, everybody, that NFPA 14, which is the standard governing the design and operation of standpipes, only requires 250 gallons per minute per outlet. So even if you're a department that's using 1 3/4 line, you try to connect 2 1 3/4 lines, and they're each flowing 180 gallons a minute. That's 360 gallons a minute. Anything over 250 gallons a minute, especially when you have a pressure reducing valve, is a gift. And unless you flow tested that building, you don't know if you're going to get any more water from that outlet. Yes, the standpipe is capable of flowing 500 gallons a minute at 100 psi pre-1993. But the question is, how many gallons per minute per outlet? What my department has done, and it's not etched in stone yet, it's not in writing, is what we've been doing is connecting a section of 2.5-inch hose to the outlet 2 floors below the fire, and bring it up to the landing below the fire and put a gate valve there, not a Y, a gate valve like you'd put on a hydrant with a screw. It's actually a gate. It's not a ball valve. And an inline gauge. And then when that line is charged, the one firefighter can be controlling the hand wheel of the outlet for the first line and controlling the gate that is connected to 2 floors below. And again, Inline gauges are great, but inline gauges are meaningless unless each line is flowing. Daryl, I can't agree more that when you charge a second line, it is so tricky because the first line has to be flowing, and then the second line, you're going to have to build up the pressure in the first line, and then if one of the lines shuts down, then you end up with too much pressure on one line. So it's dicey. It is dicey. And I'm not an expert, and I don't pretend to be, but I'll tell you, if you're using a Y, make sure you don't have too much confidence or rely too heavily on it, because you really need to train in shutting down and charging a second line off of that Y.
Yeah, what we ended up doing, because we were also a heavy pre-connect department, when we went to a static hose bed, one static bed of 2.5 and a static bed of 1 3/4, it really eliminated the need for that for our everyday operations. The second line, it's just an original stretch. The next company goes to the pumper and stretches another line to a location. I think the gated Y can start sucking companies into thinking that the next line needs to be operating in the vicinity of the first line. In reality, you could have a carport going and it's lapping up into an apartment where they're two separate areas, or the first line's in the house and the next line's into an exposure. And having the ability to just keep things simple and stretch a second line, the second line can now actually be a backup line. It's not a backup line if it's coming off of the same trunked line. We can lose our entire, all of our eggs in one basket. And the other thing is, it's got its own gauge, its own outlet. It's really a safe way to operate.
My dad, a 33-year veteran of the Chicago Fire Department, used to ask me, Bill, what good is your backup line if it is coming off the same apparatus as your first line and that apparatus breaks down? What good is it? And, of course, it was kind of easier for him to say that than in my situation, because in the city of Chicago, you got a hydrant every 300 feet. And to the best of my knowledge, I do believe that the second line comes off of a second apparatus from a second water supply. And so if you're using Ys, it's something to think about. I think we could devote an entire hangout to Ys, and I think we'll delve into this quite a bit more next week. Can I pose this question to everybody? And I'm going to start with Captain Mike Dugan. How do you determine or estimate the length of hose necessary to reach and operate in the fire apartment or fire area? Now, this pertains to multiple dwellings or offices, and it doesn't matter if it's off of a standpipe or not. Mike Dugan, if you could weigh in on that. Again, how do you estimate your stretch?
Well, in the FDNY, the control person, the firefighter assigned to control, is responsible for the stretch. The officer says start a line, and the engine company gets the proper size and the proper amount of hose to where they have to go. They know where the fire is located, and the truck company going through the front door, if it's a multiple dwelling, is going to yell out whether there's a well hole or not. Okay, and our trick is the elbow. If you can drop your elbow in your bunker coat inside the banisters and get from side to side, that's enough to stretch a line up. Okay, you're going to tell that you have a well hole. You're going to say we have a well hole. Okay, great. Then I know it's going to take one length to go a 5-story building. Okay, what floor is the fire on? Where is the fire? What size hose are we stretching? Okay, these are all things that the engine company, a good engine company, is determining on their own. Because again, you could have a relief officer, a fill-in officer, a brand new guy on his first day being a lieutenant or a captain in the fire department, and the engine company still is whatever the engine number on the side of it is always going to be that engine company. And their responsibility is to make that officer, that new guy, look good. Bring the right amount of hose, the right size of hose, and get it to the right location. And if your engine company can't do that, it's time to get back to it. So that senior, usually we don't make a truckie, that person, we try not to. We give it to an engine guy, and we give it to one of the guys who's got some time in the engine company. So he knows the buildings in his neighborhood, knows what he's doing, estimates the stretch, and if you're going to estimate, err a little, only a little, on the size of the hose stretch, so you don't stretch short. You do not want spaghetti in the street. You don't want to mess, because all of those kinks, even though you're probably using good key hose and it's kink resistant, you still don't want all those bends or those loops in that hose line. You want to get that line as little slack as needed to the fire area.
Clark, I'll pose the same question to you. How do you determine or estimate the length of hose stretch necessary to reach and operate in the fire department or fire area? Again, this could be coming off of your apparatus or a stand.
Yeah, it's mostly Captain Gustin. We're in Las Vegas Boulevard. We have hotel fires. I have very, very few. In fact, I can't even think of any high-rise office complexes I have with the big open areas and the cubicles. I don't believe I have any of those in my first in. As the first company is going up, we send 4 companies up. We should go to the floor below, and we walk the hallway. One firefighter is going to count doors. He's going to figure out what side the hall we're on. He's going to count doors. The other firefighter is going to count steps. As soon as we reach that number, because in hotels the numbers usually line up. Room 512 is the same as 612, 712, 812. So as soon as we reach that door, I look at the one fireman. He'll tell me 9 doors on the left. I look at the other fireman. He tells me 79 feet down the hallway. Boom. That's how I determine my stretch. We hook up to the floor below. That's typically one 50-foot section for the floor below, and then I add another 50-foot section for the room because I want to make sure I have enough hose to go all the way to the window. So that's typically how we determine that stretch, and it has to be automatic. I've said this before on the Hangouts. We do this on every EMS call we have. Every EMS call, without me saying anything, we get off the elevator with our EMS bags. As soon as we make it to the door where the security guards with our sick person, I look at my firemen, and they automatically say 10 doors on the left, 109 feet down the hall. We do that on every single call. And also, I want them to have some kind of idea where they are, situational awareness. I want these guys to know, hey, if something happens to me and you have to call a mayday for me, I don't want to be the only guy that knows exactly where I am. All right? I need you guys to be able to tell the officer, mayday, mayday, we're on the 9th floor, 9 rooms down the hall on the left side. Give these guys a chance to get you. So that's how we determine stretches in Clark County.
So we do basically the same thing, Clark. If we can reach the apartment or hotel room, provided that they're line up and provided that you have average size return stairs. Now, you get into scissor stairs, it's a whole different ballgame. But if you've got average size apartments or hotel rooms and average size scissor stairs, if you can reach the fire apartment or compartment or hotel room on the floor below the fire from the attack stairwell, it will require 100 more feet to penetrate any area of your average size hotel or apartment unit. That's giving you 50, which is actually less than 50, to go from the floor below the fire to the fire floor, and 50 feet to penetrate anywhere within the fire compartment itself. So there's other ways, looking with a tick, and there are now some ticks that actually have somewhat of a range finder on it. Remember, you're looking at surface, not gas temperature, surface temperature. You may be able to, the door's going to be open, if you could take a look at the door jamb and see how many feet down the hallway. That is another method. The other is rope bags, where you, on my department, we have 100-foot rope bags with a knock at 50 feet. So if the fire was in 1207, if I went to 1107 and ran down the hallway, I'd know how many feet it would take to go from the attack stairwell to the fire apartment. So those are just some of the methods that we use to determine. I don't like to say estimate. I like to use the word determine. Beryl, do you have any other thoughts for us on that?
Yeah, we had Kevin here earlier, and I'm going to steal something from him because he was with Engine 227. He had a firefighter he was working with that he obviously looks highly upon. His last name was Higgins, And he said, hey, whenever they took runs, they stretched lines into the building, and I really admire that. I feel that we're not estimating on the scene as much as estimating prior to the fire. We got to be out there estimating how many people we need in the stretch. Have the battalion chief involved too, so they can see how many companies are going to need to get, 1 or 2 or 3 lines into a certain building. Know your own buildings. We could talk about, how much hose goes up the side of the building, or how many, lengths of hose it takes to get to a flight of stairs, but you have to be out there doing it, because you could know a good estimate, but if you're not practicing it, it's going to be a fumbled mess. And with that said, I think there's a couple different estimates. On a lengthy stretch, once you get to the building, Bill, you were talking about a fire where you could hardly see the face of the building because of the amount of smoke. Maybe you get to the front of the building and you realize it's the 3rd floor of a Victorian and you need an extra length or 2, but you can't determine that from the rig. The person at the rig is going to be in the best position of counting the lengths of hose that are coming off. So a few different people on the fire ground are determining how much hose is getting stretched, but that company is going to work best together if they're getting out there, stretching hose into their buildings, talk to the building managers, find vacant buildings, find buildings under construction, and find some creative ways to put boots on the ground and do it.
I couldn't agree more. And on my department, drill time is at a premium. And if we can conduct some pre-fire plan during the smells and bells calls or the emergency medical service calls, that's where we're doing most of our pre-fire planning. And never pass up the opportunity to talk it up with your people. How would we get a hose line into this joint? I'm looking at just a few minutes before we have to say goodbye for another month. We're going to close this out with some final thoughts. Chief Bobby Halton, any words of wisdom for our folks that are watching?
Great conversation. And while you were talking, I was thinking about, we talk about the stretch, and one of the things to remember is when we start talking about our resource allocations on some of these stretches, when we're talking about high rises, when we're talking about these larger fires, you may have multiple engines involved. We talked about backup lines being off separate water supplies. Always keep in mind that often requires that we allocate more than just the engineer or the chauffeur or the driver to affect those setups. So when we're talking about some of these stretches, we have to keep in the back of our minds that on some of these more complicated stretches, you could have up to 5 engines if you're really trying to deliver high flows. And also it came to mind that people should always check out NFPA 1961. That's your appliances, nozzles. We talked about wires, but remember other things that you have, like your chick swans, your gates, everything that you have that's connected to your hose in some ways affects that flow. So the use of a flow meter on the intake side of the apparatus will always give you an adequate idea or a very good idea of what you're actually flowing out the tip of the nozzle. There are a lot of devices out there with their little gauges or whatever that they put at the end of the tip. Not nearly as adequate. Remember, water is a non-compressible substance, so whatever comes into the engine has to go out of the engine. So that always puts your digitally and calibrated flow meter on the intake side when you're doing these evolutions. But keep in mind that resource allocation issue when we're talking about manpower and affecting hose line movement, especially when we're estimating some of these more complicated stretches where you may have multiple engines involved or multiple lines involved. And also think about when you're talking about water supply in particular, that you have a variety of water supply delivery applications available to you. You should know how and when to use all your tips, and there's a wide variety of tips, everything from air aspirating nozzles to traditional fogs and smoothbores. The other thing that came to mind when we were talking very briefly, 2 things. One, a lesson learned for us on the FDIC side that we learned is that I've been speaking about the need for atmospheric monitoring. As a matter of fact, it was the feature of one of my keynotes this year. On Thursday, I talked about the need to estimate where the toxicity of the fire ground actually begins. And it's not once we enter the building, it's actually a distance from the building. Now, without gas monitors to know exactly where that is, you may just have to estimate. But I was hypocritical this year, and it falls on me, is that I did not supply atmospheric monitoring at some of our IDLH sites. It was pointed out to me by a lovely email from a firefighter who's associated with the Navy, and next year the team and I have agreed that we will do atmospheric monitoring on all our IDLH sites, so that we know where people need to be masked up in order to improve our safety, survivability, and health and wellness. So that was a lesson learned for us. Also, to Daryl's point, there's a great video out there that was produced by the San Diego Fire Department. They had a bail failure several years ago at a structure fire in San Diego, a two-story residential fire, and they had some other issues that occurred along with that bail failure. That's available. It's out there. They've shared it readily, and they did a great job of analyzing what happened when that bail did fail. They used to put their backup line used to go to protect exposures, and I think they made some adjustments based upon that experience. So a good learning video about a bail failure, which do occur, and it was interesting to hear Daryl bring that up. Thank you so much for allowing me to be on, Bill. Remember, get your applications in for FDIC 2017. Go to FDIC.com. You'll find a link on there, or go to fireengineering.com. You'll find a link on there. Please get your submissions in. And one of the things that Bill mentioned, that he didn't know Mike and Robin, Mike and John were going to be in Robin's class. We only can budget for one primary instructor. But if you want Bill Guston to come in, or you want to team teach with someone else, you can absolutely do that, as long as they're already coming, or you know they're coming, or they're getting there somehow, or they're already teaching. We're more than happy to allow 2 and 3 people to help facilitate some of these more complicated and nuanced classes, like What About the Victim that Robin presented. There were several of the classes that did that. And so, if you let us know in advance, then that way we can schedule them so they're not teaching at the same time you are. So but for purposes of budgeting, we only do one instructor. We did 211 classes, 80 workshops, and 23, I believe, hands-on training classes, over 590 instructors. So we have to stay within confines of our budget, and so we only list the primary instructor, but that doesn't mean that 2 or 3 or 4 other men and women might not come in and facilitate that. So, sorry to ramble.
No, that's fine. Go ahead, Mike.
Well, I just want to say thank you very much for having me. FDIC was great. I had a great year this year. I had a lot of fun. I did do my first 5K with Bobby with my new knee. I won't say I ran it, but I did make my first 5K with my new knee, so that was good. Was it just a little damp? Just a little damp. So it was a lot of fun, and I had a great time, and thank you. Hopefully, God willing, I'll see you all next year at FDIC. If you haven't been there yet, plan on it, because it is nothing better.
Daryl, any final thoughts?
Yeah, actually, another classroom I missed. I'm getting some feedback in my headset. Or a class I had was with Chief John Norman at a bar in Berkeley during FDIC, or right after FDIC. That was one of the better classes I've had in a long time. And we talked about leadership a lot. And another motivation to get out there with your crews and stretch lines, or do your truck work or your extrication work, or whatever it is that you guys are working on, is as an officer, your crews will know what to expect from you. You know, sometimes we have different ways of doing it, and they're going to just do what the last guy had them do if we don't get out there and train the crews. It's going to put everybody on the same page. So as far as from a boss's point of view, do that. And the firefighters like doing that. They like getting out there and getting their hands dirty and practicing. So when it's time to perform, you know, they're gonna perform well. That gives a lot of job satisfaction. People want to do a good job. The other thing is, don't be afraid of getting in touch with your vendors and trying out equipment. All these vendors are out here. They want to loan you stuff, let you try it, and get your hands on it. So we don't all have the ability to purchase new stuff, but we all have the ability to try new stuff and help shape the direction that your company or department's going.
Clark, any final thoughts?
Yeah, real quickly, brothers and sisters, I think for me personally, this FDIC 2016 was the best one I'd ever been to. It was great seeing everybody, and I was really thrilled. People would come up to me that I'd never seen before, and they'd say, "Hey, I recognize you. You're on the Google chat." I was amazed that turns out there's more than just the 5 of us that watch these things. So I was thrilled. I was thrilled, but yeah, and you know, again, I can't wait. I cannot wait. I think I'm actually going to put some papers in for 2017.
All right, and Daryl, excellent point. You can avail yourself to equipment from vendors, and again, thank our vendor, our sponsor, Key, and you contact them at keyfire.com, and they will be very happy to send you a couple lengths of hose for you to try out. That about does it for another month. Thank you for participating. Thank you for watching. Thank Key for their support. Brothers and sisters, we will see you next month, second Wednesday of the month. Between now and then, stay happy, stay healthy, and stay safe. God bless you.